Hello, friends, anti-novelists, anti-netters, curious onlookers, and Lilligans. LiLLiPub.org, I just wanted to put a big plug in. This is a little community that the esteemed Kathleen Spracklin and I have whipped up in order to give us all a place to meet up, talk about our writing, hang out, love books, and just generally have a great time. So hightail it on over to LiLLiPub.org because we'd love to see you there and continue this conversation. Welcome back to this episode of Zettelkasten for Fiction, where imagination finds order. If this is your first time here, I'm Victoria Crowder. I am the author of the forthcoming book, Zettelkasten for Fiction, and this series is just looking at some of the things that are going into the book to provide tools for you to get your writing done. So, we've already covered Acts 1 and 2 of the 4-act structure. I'm taking a break before we go on to Act 3 to take a look at character, because as I always say, working on a novel is not a linear project, generally. At least it's not for me. It's kind of circular. I might work on character for a while, then I might work on plot for a while, then I might work on setting for a while, and then I might loop back to character, and so on and so forth. So whatever your process is, take what works for you, stick those tools in your tool belt, and leave the rest for a rainy day. This is just to get into your hands things that I think might be helpful. So, the first thing we're going to look at is, this is what I like to call the character circle of development. When you're working on a new character to install them into your Zettelkasten, you're going to begin with that character developing through exploration. You're going to explore their name, where they live, what they look like, who's their family, all of those little aspects that are going to bring that character to life to establish a connection to your reader that makes that reader want to follow the character through your story. So as you're doing those explorations, in the model that we're examining first, which is a conflict-based narrative, that's going to reveal conflict. You've got to have some kind of a challenge, obstacle, conflict. It can be internal, external. There's lots of options for how to build that creative curiosity and tension so that readers want to follow that character into the struggle to see what's going to happen. That's a great way to build tension. That also drives your plot. That helps you understand, okay, if this happens over here and this character carries this wound because of this, then when they get over here, this is how they're going to react because of what's happened before in their life. See how that lines up? It's a nice way to help drive yourself through the story. As a result of driving that plot and giving that character struggles and obstacles and opportunities to grow, you're going to develop either a positive growth path or a negative growth path. And that then brings you back to, how is your character going to react to this growth? And again, that puts you into exploration. So that's just a simple representation of how you follow your character through each of the scenes that you write, the outcomes or the sequels to those scenes, and then what needs to happen or what could happen next in order to drive them through that story. So let's take a look at a character specifically so I can show you what I mean. These are the cards for my main female character in the Conjuring Stitch. Her character number is 7110 in my Zettelkasten. This card system will be available for you in the Zettelkasten for Fiction book, so have no fear, you will have all of this at hand. But let's take a quick look. On this first card, I've given her her name and her number. I've made a note that Kaler means keykeeper, gatekeeper, or guard of an entrance. I chose that name for her for a reason. Giving your character a significant name that spurs your readers to think about what does that mean or how could that play out or apply is just another fun cookie to put in for your readers. You'll notice I've listed her dad as Henry Kaler and her mom as Meredith. And I've made a note that her mom hails from the Baltic seafaring women of the island of Terra Feminarium. That's a real place. Another cool cookie for readers that want to go check it out. Over here, I've made her date of birth 3/3/1979. Notice I made myself a note, not 1989. I originally had her born in 89, but because of events that I wrote later on in my Act 1, I had to go back and change her date of birth, so she was born in 79 instead. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about using that circle of development, because decisions that you make over here are going to influence things that you do over here. And having it all on your cards is a nice way to keep it straight and work those things out. I've got a little note about what she looks like. She's tall and slender and fit. She's prone to fainting and perhaps a weak heart. She uses her professional or academic armor as a defense. So, are you already getting a picture of this gal in your head? That's how you start to sketch out what she looks like for you, as well as what you want to show your readers. On the next card, which is labeled 7110G/1, so G is her character letter, because A through F are other characters. Okay, so you can see how I've just stuck that letter in there to make sure that all of her cards get placed right here. So she has a wound from her past, which is her dad left when she was young. Her mother's in an institution. So we've maybe got some issues of abandonment there, maybe some uber control of her life. Just little notes to myself about her psychology. What is her misbelief? Now, a misbelief is something that often results as a consequence of carrying this wound, generally from childhood, but it could happen, as a young adult. But what does she believe about the world because of this set of circumstances? Well, she doesn't believe that she can trust, particularly men, because her dad left. And she becomes very self-sufficient and lives a loner lifestyle. So again, I'm just sketching out for myself kind of what is her worldview and how does that work? This results in her having a cynical sense of humor. And I've made a note about the mirror moment. I mentioned earlier in my video discussing the midpoint that that's a great time to have a mirror moment where your character looks at themselves and says, what have I become? I've got to change. That's a James Scott Bell-ism. I would encourage you to check him out. He is a great writing teacher. Here I've got some variations of the misbelief. Trust, building relationships. She's solitary. She has problems with people telling her the truth and believing them. Question to myself, how has she engineered smallness and solitude in her life? Again, those are really good character building blocks, just using those cards to ask yourself questions so that as you're drafting those scenes, maybe you're going to set her misbelief cards aside and have them at hand as you're writing to remember you might want to insert these questions in the narrative as a way to bring those items to the attention of your dear reader. What are the symptoms of her worldview? She's lonely, she's unfulfilled but feels like she's destined for greatness. She has a restless nature. The symptoms are she's flighty and she dives into her work. She's always soul searching, but she buries herself in the work at hand. So another thing to get to know about her. What things does she dislike in others? Things like compulsive behavior and recklessness. That would be an obvious choice given what we know about her psychology and her makeup from the earlier cards. So by choosing those items and pegging her with things like not liking people who are like this, what's the obvious consequence of doing that, of setting that up? It's to bring that person into her life, to challenge her with the very thing that she dislikes in others. So that's a certain plot thread that could be followed just to decide, is that something that I want to use or not? You're just talking to yourself on the cards and using them as prompts. I've made some notes about her best friend and how he takes care of her and anticipates her needs. I've made a note about her childhood friend. The fact that she was betrayed by female friends at boarding school, and that also contributes to her being a loner. Are you getting a sense for what this gal is like? What about an enemy or a rival? I made myself a note. This could be a co-worker subplot, some kind of betrayal. Her nemesis is to be revealed to her later. So I'm just reminding myself that these things will be unpacked later on in the story. They're not going to happen before the midpoint. So again, just talking to yourself about your character. What does she love about her family? Her dad's gone, but she has great memories of him. She doesn't have many memories of her mom. Hypervigilance from being with a mother who is very in tune with others. So she has become very aware of what others are thinking because she was raised up until she was 10 by a mother who generated negativity in her life. So these are all things to be worked out in your story. And as you start to plot them out, you start to reveal to yourself, what is this character like? Her life motto is that things will be better tomorrow. Now, some of these items that I have just used as the little prompts, they come from teachers like K.M. Weiland and James Scott Bell and Sarah Cannon. I've noted those authors who have informed my journey and the journey from which I have taught my students down in the description box. So definitely check out other systems, other teachers, really dive into the possibilities, because I don't want to give you one way to write your story. I want to give you the tool of the Zettelkasten to develop and track it. And then I want to introduce you to lots of different perspectives and options, both for story structure and building story and storytelling, so that you can choose the best way through that suits your goals. That's what this is all about. I've made some notes about where she works, and I've got a little arrow over here to flip this over. What do we have? Check it out. This is a map of where she works. The Nelson Atkins Museum is here. She's a researcher there. There's the lawn. Here's Oak Street. Notice in blue, we know that blue is the color for my main male character, Marshall Branch. Here on Oak Street is where he parks his truck on the day that they meet. If you travel down Oak Street and go west, that's where the horse fountains are. She has a major horse phobia, which that figures prominently. And then if you continue west across into the plaza, you pass by the HMS Beagle, and that takes you to Florals and Floss, where she meets Gretchen, who is another pivotal figure in the story. So this is just a visual reminder representation to myself of what the layout of her neighborhood and her world looks like. Those are the kinds of things that you want to include. So remember when I mentioned that the women in her family hail from the Terra Feminarium, which is actually an island in the Baltic Sea? Check it out. I've made myself just a little map that shows what it looks like. So that's just another way to remind yourself of the heritage and the history of her family and how that might play into your story. So I will leave you here on this exploration of character, because in the next video, we're going to dive in a little bit more to character, and we're going to talk about building Act 3, which is after the midpoint. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining me. Start getting down some details on your cards about those characters so that you can start developing them and start running them through those kinds of obstacles and challenges that are going to make your story interesting and engaging and keep your readers turning pages. With that, I will leave you for tonight, and I will see you tomorrow.